everybody.
Hello.
Hello, Jack. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
And welcome everybody who's listening in to our first policy hour. Chambers of Commerce are the voice of the private sector and the voice of the business community, and it's really important for us that we make sure that we have great links with our local MPs, and I'm fortunate to say that we do, and also that we give businesses as many opportunities as possible to talk directly to decision makers. So this is the first ever online policy hour that we've ever tried, so bear with us if the technology goes a bit weird. I know I look like I'm in some sort of green box, but it's the best colour I can get, I'm afraid, at the moment. It's really important in this time of an unprecedented crisis that our decision makers hear from the people who are affected by it. And I know that Joe and Jack have been talking a lot to their constituencies, and this is a real chance for the business community to speak to them directly. So welcome, Jack and Joe. And I'd like to sort of start, if you would, by doing a sort of 5-minute introduction. Jack, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. And I want to firstly thank everyone for all the efforts that are being made to comply with the social distancing measures that have been put in place by the government. And especially I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for the vital support that they've been giving to businesses locally. Our businesses are facing absolutely unprecedented challenges. And from those who have been contacting me, I know many are very worried about what the future might hold. Many businesses across Stoke-on-Trent have had to close entirely, and others are struggling with much reduced orders or staff becoming ill. And all our lives are changed and put on hold by what is happening. We're all getting used to this virtual, socially distanced world that we now find ourselves in. And I have been helping many of my local businesses to find the right support for them or to raise queries and concerns with government. It is vital that our local firms get the support that they need to get through this, and that jobs are protected. Obviously, we have many very different businesses across our area, large and small, and that is why the government have put in place a whole range of measures to support businesses, whether it be the job retention scheme for furloughed workers, the £330 billion package of loans and guarantees that have been put in place, the self-employed business support scheme, or the bounce back loans which were launched yesterday. These are just some of the things that are being done to help businesses to cope and get through this. Clearly, nothing will be able to fully mitigate the consequences of coronavirus on our lives and livelihoods, but I do think that the comprehensive actions that have been taken by the government do go a long way to help with these challenges. I've also found the government being very flexible and adaptable during this time. The extension of the furlough eligibility date is an example, and the new top-up scheme to reach those businesses which missed out in the original criteria for small business grants is another. These really do show it is determined to do whatever it takes to get business through this. This is important because it is our businesses, our industries, we will need to rebuild and jumpstart our economy once we get to the other side of this virus. Our businesses generate the wealth of this country and our city, keep people in employment, and without these protections now, our recovery will be so much more difficult. We've seen some amazing work being done to tackle coronavirus and support the most vulnerable people in our society. We've seen businesses stepping up in a whole range, whether it be helping to produce PPE or testing equipment, and right across the Trent, people from all walks of life have been responding to help the most vulnerable to get through this. I want to thank each and every individual who has responded and been part of the efforts to fight this pandemic. It is how we cope in this adversity which I think really demonstrates the strength of our communities. I hope that if anything that we can take from these challenges, we're going to get through now. And if there is anything positive that can come from this, it's the strength we have found in our communities. Although we are apart for now, we're never alone, and we will get through this. And I hope that as a city, we can emerge stronger.
Thank you, Jack. That's really, really good, a really good summary. I think I would like to endorse the comments that you've made about how the government have responded so well to the business community and our needs. I'm sure there'll be questions about some of the issues that have been raised and some of the schemes that have been raised as we go through. Joe, would you like to give us 5 minutes introduction?
Yes, well, I'm not going to use 5 minutes. I wholeheartedly endorse everything Jack said. I want to give time to your members to ask questions, because I think that's really important. We've been working really hard listening to what local businesses need, and I think I just want to re-emphasize the fact that it's been incredibly challenging for our community, and it's also been incredibly challenging for government to respond in a speedy and effective way to try and minimise job losses and challenges and businesses going under during this incredibly difficult period. And I do hope that the people recognise that anything that's come to me and through my emails and mailbox has been passed on to ministers, and you see a very speedy reaction to the attempt of government was always to help the largest number of people as quickly as possible. But in any measure that's set out to help people, there are always people who are left behind. And one of the key things for Stoke-on-Trent is that we don't want to be left behind anymore, and the whole levelling up agenda is centred around economic regeneration. It's centred around businesses doing well, and I think that from my point of view, I'm very interested in hearing feedback from businesses as to where we're going with the next step, because I think we're all now starting to look forward. The pandemic has been frightful for everybody in every walk of life, and the next stage, though, is going to be how we, as an economy, come out of this. And business has such a huge role to play in that I think that let's be optimistic looking forward, but let's also identify what we need from government and what we as MPs can lobby for to make sure that business is in a strong position going forward.
Thank you, Jo. I think it has been really very insightful. I mean, we work quite a lot with the British Chambers of Commerce and have lobbied on behalf of the business community with the BCC to government. And I think it has been really, really encouraging how much everybody from the Chancellor right the way through every department has really been listening to what businesses need and responding as well as they can and as fast as they can. Yeah. So I think some of the schemes have been absolutely fantastic. I think obviously there are always people who are last to come to some of this, and some of those issues that they're facing still need to be addressed. And I know that that's what some of the questions are that we have. Laura, do you want to just go through the housekeeping about how we do questions so that everybody knows?
Hi, everyone. Hi. So just a quick update. I know that we all sort of started a bit suddenly, but great to see you all here today. So for those of you that don't know, we cannot see or hear you today. So the only way that you can communicate with us is via the chat function at the bottom or the Q&A at the bottom as well. What I would ask is we have some pre-scheduled questions, questions that came in before we got started today. So we will be asking those as well. So if you pop your hand up and want to speak, we will unmute you and we will get you to say those questions as soon as we get started. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Laura. Well, the first question that we have is one that I know is representative of a lot of business issues, and it's from somebody who couldn't be here at the moment. But they say one of the key issues and one of the areas of focus that they have at the moment is trying to work out how to end the furlough scheme. And many others are worrying about how to do this most effectively. Obviously, if there is a sort of end of the cliff moment, then that will put a lot of businesses in an enormous amount of stress because we don't know what the market is or what the other issues are. So it's really a plea for, is there going to be any sort of transitional arrangements in place? Or is there going to be some way in which businesses can start to flex their workforce as they come back in order to fit with whatever the new normal is in terms of doing business?
Shall I lead on that? So I think the simple answer is that everybody in government is very much aware that a cliff edge would not be good for the country. I think the Chancellor actually said as much yesterday in the briefing. So whilst there's no scheme outlined yet, I know that they've been working on it for a very long time, and there is an understanding, that businesses can't just bounce back, and that there needs to be some sort of phased approach. What that will look like, though, certainly will depend on all the feedback that ministers have been getting from all the different sectors, because I think you have to bear in mind that, you know, for some sectors, and I know this particular member is in the tourism sector, it's going to be particularly difficult because of the seasonality of the business. So, you know, there is definitely an understanding that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to what it would look like.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with what Joe said there, and there is some flexibility within the scheme because there is about a minimum period. So there's a minimum period of 3 weeks which you can furlough an employee for. So there is some flexibility. If you wanted to start bringing an employee back, you could do that after 3 weeks if things started to improve and pick up. But you have to furlough a member of staff for at least a minimum, as I say, of 3 weeks. The scheme is scheduled to end in June, as we all know, but also the government have said that if necessary, if they do need to extend that further, they would do so. So there is, they are reserving that flexibility if they need to further extend it and make sure that the support that businesses do need is in place.
Yes, I think it's also making sure that, you know, you might want somebody who only needs to work 3 days a week, for example, or 2 days a week, and how as we go into coming out of lockdown and into recovery, how that is smoothed over so that businesses can manage most effectively the demand and supply in their business. And I think that's one of the issues at the moment. I think there was a question on from Ramona, I think, Ramona Hershey on the chat. Ramona, do you want to, as it's about the furlough scheme, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the problem we've just had is that because the department that issues national insurance numbers has put a moratorium in place, they're not issuing any new numbers for 3 months. We hit a problem that we went to claim on the job retention scheme for just one member of staff that was furloughed. She was a newish member of staff prior to lockdown. And because she doesn't have an NI number, she only had a temporary one on her payslip. We are therefore now unable to claim any money back from her. So I paid out her salary, but it looks like HMRC have told my accountant that we just cannot get the money back if she doesn't have an actual NI number. But of course, she cannot get an actual NI number because that department will not give her one. So I've had no choice but to bring her back to work so that I can at least get some work out of her in exchange for the money I'm paying. So is there a way to get NI numbers issued, or for HMRC to, at least in this temporary situation, to accept these pay slips?
Well, I'd certainly, you know, get their MP, whoever's constituency she might be in, to write to HMRC about that. But what action was taken was that the scheme was then extended until the 19th of March, which meant that anybody who was employed up until the 19th of March could then be furloughed. But how it's based is if they're on the PAYE system. So as long as they were on that system previously, then they should be able to be furloughed. If there are issues with that, with getting an NI number, then, as I say, happy, if it's my constituents, I'm sure if it's Joe's or whoever else is, that MP would be very happy to write to HMRC to ask about that further.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ramona. The next question we have is one which we've come across a lot, and I have to say that the government have responded to this, but I think the response may create some more issues. But it's about the small businesses who fall through the gaps because they haven't been paying rates. So they've been either in shared workspaces or where the rate and rent have been brought up together. These are some of the businesses who are some of the smallest, who don't have cash reserves and who are running out of cash. Now, the government have put forward a discretionary fund, which I think is due to come into operation in the next week or so, and it's going to go through the local authorities. I think the question really is, how do businesses really position themselves to take advantage of what is a discretionary fund? And how is government going to make sure that there is no unfairness in that because it is discretionary?
Do you want to start, Joe? Or?
Yeah, sorry, I lost a connection. My connection is not brilliant, so apologies if I suddenly disappear or break up. So yes, the discretionary fund was brought in for that very reason. I'm sure Jack, like myself, has been lobbying on behalf of these smaller businesses who maybe have a license whereby the business rates are included in the license, and therefore they're not eligible, they weren't eligible under the previous scheme. Discretionary fund is exactly what it says. It's at the discretion of the local council. I have no reason to believe that, in my case, Stoke City Council would have any issue with paying out to businesses who are eligible. And so I would just say to people, please apply to the council if you are eligible under the new criteria. And if there are any problems, please get in touch with me. But I don't anticipate there being problems, because this is precisely the sector that it's aimed at, the businesses it's aimed at. It's those smallest businesses who were struggling to get any help.
Absolutely, and as Jo says, we've had lots of businesses who've been contacting. I've had lots of businesses in similar circumstances who've been falling between the gaps on this issue, and certainly I've written to a number of ministers about this, because it is vital that they are entitled to support that other businesses have been able to get. And I'm pleased that the government have put in place and listened to those concerns, yes, and put this in place, which I think will be ensuring that those businesses that, for example, if they were in a business unit where their rates were included with their rent, those are the sorts of businesses that now could get this support. And certainly if there are any where the council haven't been issuing this new amount of money that's come out, if there are issues with that, then I'm sure we'll be very happy to write to the council about this, because I think the council will certainly ensure that most will get it. If there are anomalies where there are problems with it, I think it's important that we do raise those. So happy to write on behalf of any businesses where there are issues, if there are any that do emerge.
Thank you very much, and I think that would be reassuring. I think the issue really is for the councils to make sure that their guidance is transparent and obvious, and so that companies really understand how they can benefit from it, and not waste time if they're not eligible. That's been one of the issues that we found, is that people sometimes have been struggling to understand the eligibility of schemes. So cool. I know that was raised by a couple of people. I think it was Mark and Ted. Do you want to either of you come back to that on that point, or are you happy with that? It's Mark Saville or Ted Edwards? No, there's all happy. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry. So just moving on to the next question. One of the biggest sectors that have been affected is around the leisure and tourism sectors, and particularly around city centres, retail and hospitality in the city centres, which we've all relied on. And in terms of Stoke-on-Trent, we were really pleased that it was becoming such a much more vibrant and exciting city, which is what we wanted. We've had a couple of questions relating to that, which are particularly around the bid company. And the bid company, for those who don't know, is the Business Improvement District. So would you support the British Bid's call to the government that all bid levy payments should be paid by the government, so that rather than the levy payers themselves, because they're obviously going to be facing so many issues in the city centres at the moment, and so giving levy payers a bit of a holiday, and hence allowing the bids to sort of be assured of their income, but also then be able to carry on doing the work that they need to do to drive footfall and to rebuild the city centres. Jo, I don't know if you want to start with that one.
So I'm happy to start. So bids across the nation have been very active lobbying their MPs, and I wrote to the Minister, Simon Clarke, the Minister for Regional Growth and Local Government, and I was pleased to get a response on May the 1st, actually, saying that the core operational costs of bids for the next 3 months have been are going to be funded through government. So they recognise the short-term emergency measures that need to be taken, and obviously they can delay they can extend their bid arrangements until March next year to make sure that they keep going. I recognise, I mean, I was delighted to visit our local bid and see the wonderful work that they're doing just before lockdown. You know, clearly, as you say, the area that the bid operates in Stoke-on-Trent is critical for the local economy. You know, people are really struggling, and especially town centre retail. And so, you know, I would utterly back the need for bids to have an ongoing role and to help advise how we take this forward. So absolutely.
No, I agree totally.
Retail areas, so,
yeah.
No, I agree totally with what Jo said there. I think it is vital that we do support the bid because, you know, obviously, although the city centre is in Jo's constituency, the city centre is vital for the whole of our area, the whole of North Staffordshire, that it's successful and prospers. And I think, you know, ensuring that bid continues to be successful and continues to build on the early successes we've seen over the last 12 months or so is absolutely vital, that we can build on that and continue to see that grow and improve, because the rebuilding our economy once this is all over is essential. And if we're not going to see our city centre revived and redeveloped in that way, then we're not going to be able to prosper as a city as a whole. So we do need to make sure that that bid is successful and that the work that it's doing can continue.
Oh, well, it's great to hear such support for the bid. I should declare an interest in that. I'm a board member of the bid. But also, I think it's really key that we make sure, and I hope that you will support and do as much as you possibly can, that in any of the plans that Stoke-on-Trent has for the development and changes and unlocking of the city, that the bid as an organisation is involved, because it obviously represents a great chunk of the centre, but and provides that vital link between business and you know, and change that we need for the city.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Can't unmute myself. The other question that we had was really around the holiday companies and the tourism sector. The Chamber held recently a webinar to help the hospitality sector think about what it might need to do when it comes when lockdown and restrictions are released a bit more. But of course, social distancing isn't going to go away and is going to have a massive impact on all of the holiday issues. So I think really it's the question really is about is there a way in which the government can look at perhaps giving the holiday leisure sector and especially holiday operators a bit more leeway, a bit more length of time in terms of things like furlough, because they are going to take that much longer to get back up and running.
I think this is, you know, obviously the schemes that have been put in place at the moment are very general as possible to accommodate all types of business and industry. I think as we start to see that staggered and staged reduction of the lockdown, we need to be supporting particular industries like hospitality more so than others. Obviously, some of those industries are likely to be locked down for a much more longer period than some, and certainly hospitality could be one of those. So I do think that when we do see that easing, there is going to have to be more specific support for certain industries and potentially continuation of schemes for longer for some of those industries than others, to make sure that they get the support and can continue once we are up and running.
Yes, no, I mean, absolutely. The government didn't spend a huge amount of money stopping businesses going under in the early stages, only to see the tourism industries go under because, you know, they've missed the season. So definitely there is an understanding that more will need to be done. But I also think, you know, I mean, I come from a kind of entrepreneurial background. I think that it'll be interesting to see how the tourism industry and hospitality will change in this next phase. And I think, you know, we may look to how other countries are doing it. And I mean, this whole piece around safer spaces is a massive cross-government departmental discussion at the moment. So it's what will it look like and how do we need to adapt? But individual businesses, I mean, already, you know, businesses show great initiative. So cafes and things turned into takeaways overnight when, you know, they were told that they couldn't open their premises. And I think we need to apply some of these same entrepreneurial principles to, well, what will it look like in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time? And, you know, is there an opportunity to diversify? Because, you know, that it may be that's how businesses are going to survive over the next year.
I think that's a very good point, and you can see that businesses are changing and adapting with the new circumstances, which of course is what business is great at.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think there are particular areas of you know, particular age groups or particular demographics who do travel quite a lot, who might struggle. So, for example, people who are older, who might find it more difficult to travel, but they have the money. They are the ones who have kept some of those businesses afloat, and also. You know, they're the ones who've got the time to travel. So
Yes.
There are some issues around different audience, different customers and different businesses, which the government, to perhaps as we go through, give greater flexibility around.
Well, and I'm also on the topic of older people and travelling around. I'm really excited to see the pilot for the app that's going out. As we speak, because I think that you know, knowing that you're well and the person sitting next to you, if you're on a coach, is, you know, once that sort of thing becomes possible again, it'll only become possible by knowing, you know, who's infected, who isn't, and so we can't see. I don't think businesses opening up and having more interaction and social distancing being a thing of the past until we understand, well, until either we have a vaccine or we have a proper, you know, nationwide system in place that means that people can move around safely. And so I think, you know, we all ought to be keeping our fingers crossed that this app is going to be as good as it's built, and that it's rolled out very quickly across the whole country.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm sure we all look forward to that.
Yes.
Really nice to be able to do that.
I certainly do.
I look longingly at my screensavers of photos now, of places I've been, as, you know, wanting to go back to. I think there are a couple of other questions that we've had, which are around planning permission and the way in which businesses are perhaps being constrained a little bit by some of the rules. And again, this is something that perhaps government need to consider as we go forward about how we can do this. One of which we've had from one of our businesses is that they have they're licensed to operate within certain hours. Well, of course, with social distancing, with shift patterns having to change, with hours of operation therefore having to change, this license for those hours of operating becomes very, very restrictive and damaging to the business. So I think there are some issues about how that can be done. And then we also have businesses who are, you know, halfway through developments or halfway through getting planning permission, who've got the money in the bank, who want to grow, who see this as an opportunity, and yet everything has been forced to stop. So I don't know what you have, if you have any views about those two issues in particular.
Yeah.
Well, I do think it is important that we do. I want a more relaxed and flexible planning system as possible, really, and I think we do need to support businesses, particularly at this time where you know, we're facing these very challenging circumstances. If we have those bureaucratic burdens which are preventing them doing things that would be advantageous, then we do need to support those businesses to get through that. And you know, I'm very happy to any businesses in my constituency to write to the council about some of these issues, about whether they can be a bit more relaxed about some of these enforcement issues, particularly during the current circumstances, to try and help them, because obviously what the businesses are trying to do is to support the community effectively, and trying to work beyond those restrictions of hours and things like that, if they want to do extended deliveries to help support people during the difficult circumstances. I think we should support those businesses to be able to do that. And you know, I very much would be happy to write on behalf of any of my businesses to say to the council, could you just be a bit sympathetic given current circumstances to allow them to do this?
Yes, I mean, I think certainly that government has not intended planning departments to close down, and you know, planning committees can meet virtually like we're doing now. So, you know, there's no technical reason why these things shouldn't be possible. And we saw already at the beginning of the change in patterns of retail, you know, supermarket deliveries, that everybody was very quick to be able to allow lorries delivering goods to be able to have access. So, you know, where there is a need, and clearly, you know, getting business back on its feet is a real major need. I can't see any reason why there should be a problem with a local authority, and if it's not a local issue, then as Jack said, you know, anybody who has a problem, please, if you're in my constituency, write to me, and you know, we'll follow through, because there's no reason why these things should be held up due to planning permission.
Always forget to unmute.
Right.
Christian, you were one of the people who raised one of the questions. Do you want to answer? Do you want to ask anything more, or are you happy with that answer? No, that's Christian's quite happy with that for the moment, so that's absolutely fine. Brilliant, thank you very much. We have a few other questions still that have just come forward on the chat function and in the Q&A. So I would urge anybody, if they want to put them in there. I know that Joe has to leave promptly at 3, and we will have to finish at 3 because we've got another webinar kicking off at that sort of time. One of the questions that has come up from a couple of people really is how will the cost of managing COVID-19, which obviously has been considerable on the government, and I think we all recognise that, but how will it affect future funds or future plans for the sort of levelling up agenda? You know, obviously Stoke-on-Trent is one of the areas which is prime to be invested in because of the levelling up agenda, and we would welcome that. But there is going to be presumably an impact on the Treasury, and I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think in terms of the government investment that's being made, it is absolutely vital that we get our fair share of that. And, you know, if anywhere is eligible for levelling up, I think we are. You know, I think nobody other than Stoke-on-Trent fulfills that criteria more, to be quite honest. And I think the importance is that we get and attract that investment into our area. And certainly, from what I've seen, the government isn't holding back on investment. We've seen, obviously, some of those big infrastructure projects that have been announced just prior to the virus. They are still going ahead, and things like the bond markets as well have not been significantly affected by the crisis. So the ability of the government to borrow money to invest in infrastructure will not be significantly altered, I don't believe, by this. I think for that recovery to happen and for the recovery to be successful, we need to see the government continuing and redoubling really its efforts to invest in infrastructure and to invest in the economies throughout the UK. And it's vital that they invest in economies like Stoke-on-Trent so that we can level up the communities, that we can ensure that more of our workforce, more of the people in our communities can access better skill, better employment opportunities. And that is only going to happen if we get and secure that investment that we so desperately need.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree with Jack. And I think that, you know, for me, levelling up, the agenda hasn't changed. What might have changed somewhat is what the focus needs to be, because I do think that if we come out of this with significant job losses in the area, then we need to look at retraining, and so adult education is a key element that I think we need to look at. I think we need to look at opportunities for small businesses, and you know, it's that sort of enterprise spirit which I think will help, because I think that you know, it's been said that coronavirus affects the the more left behind communities more than others. And we absolutely still have a case for significant government investment in infrastructure, significant government investment in both housing, business, and transport. But I think also we need to look at the human cost of the impact of coronavirus, and we need to look at our community and what is needed. And I think that Stoke-on-Trent will make a very strong case with the MPs that it's got for greater investment, after COVID-19, for rebuilding those communities.
Thank you. I think that's good. And I think one of the issues that affects Stoke-on-Trent particularly is obviously we have a strong preponderance of ceramic sectors. I know that Rachel from the British Ceramic Confederation is on the webinar at the moment. I think her point, and the point that we would also reiterate from the chambers, is, these are businesses that sell into the hospitality sector and have done so massively successfully, brought in millions of pounds of revenue into Stoke-on-Trent and provided thousands of jobs. And there is obviously a concern, as the hospitality sector is so hit by COVID-19 and the restrictions, that market won't pick up. So I think there is a bit of, please can we ask our local MPs to plea on behalf of the ceramic sector particularly, that they're also included in some perhaps special support, same as the hospitality sector is getting, and recognised as part of that area.
Absolutely. Can I say hello to Laura? And I'm delighted that today sees the launch of the trade negotiations with America. The Secretary of State has been a huge supporter of the ceramics industry, and I know that we're kind of top of the agenda, which will help enormously. But the other thing that I think really is important to stress here is that she's made it very clear that there is an entire chapter devoted to SMEs doing trade with the USA. And I think that the opportunities for businesses here in Stoke-on-Trent, shouldn't be just seen as, well, the domestic market has shrunk and therefore business has shrunk. We are at a time where, having left the EU, we have global opportunities, and I think we need to really, invest in those export stories and be more, dare I say, proactive with the new opportunities that are coming our way.
No, absolutely. I would totally agree with what Jo said there. And, there is so many opportunities for the ceramics industry, not just in the US, right around the world. And we need to be making sure that we're focusing on delivering on those opportunities, that we're building more of those free trade deals that can help get rid of those very high tariffs, like those in the US, where British ceramics producers are not able to import as much ceramics into the US market because of those very onerous tariffs that exist. And if we can do that, if we can support those trade deals, if we can support more of the opportunities for the British ceramics industry, there's no reason why it cannot have a very, very successful future. And I think, moving forward, we have huge opportunities in the ceramics industry locally, not just in hospitality. Obviously, hospitality is a very key part of the ceramics industry, but also in those other parts of the industry, in the high-tech ceramics, and also in the very bespoke, creative ceramics and those bespoke products, which are very much things that we should be focusing on and doing as an industry. So I think there are huge opportunities for the ceramics industry in Stoke-on-Trent, and we need to be continuing to rise to that challenge and continuing to see our local industries compete and ensure that they're really able to deliver the products that we know are of the highest quality in the world.
Yes, and I think you're right, absolutely right about all those free trade agreements and making sure that there are the right markets for those goods and those products as soon as possible is absolutely key. A couple of questions that we've got from the charitable sector, if I may, and then I'm going to ask Danny Flynn to ask a question. So Sara from the Honeycomb Group is talking about the domestic abuse money the money that has been released by the government for domestic charities. Obviously, we know that domestic abuse at this time is rising. It is quite frightening, I think, for lots of people who are locked down with people who are not very loving, let's say. So I think the issue for the charities is how fast is the money going to come through and how do they access it? So that was one question. And the other question is absolutely pertinent at the moment, is getting the right PPE into the charitable sector, particularly around the hospices, and making sure that they have a real opportunity to get that equipment. We know that hospitals were the first line, care homes, but we also need some support for the hospice sector as well. So if you'd like to answer those two, and then I'll see about Danny.
We're fighting.
I didn't know whether you wanted to go first, Joe.
No, I'll let you go first this time.
Okay. No, absolutely. And I think, supporting our charities who are in many cases taking on more during the current outbreak is absolutely vital. And we all know the government have announced a significant package to support charities. £750 million of investment has been announced to support charities during this very difficult time. And I think it is vital that we do continue to see our charities thrive and succeed. And I hope this support does get down to many of our local charities. I know that a significant chunk of that 750 million is directly for some of those smaller charities that we all see in our communities and do such fantastic work. I'd like to obviously thank all of the charities who are taking on much more difficult tasks at the moment and really doing all they can to support our communities, supporting the most vulnerable people in our communities at this time. And I do think that it is vital as well that we do continue to raise awareness around domestic abuse. It is totally unacceptable that we have some of the highest levels of domestic abuse in the whole country in Stoke-on-Trent. We have the highest levels of domestic abuse by far in the whole of Staffordshire in Stoke-on-Trent, and we need to make sure that we are taking action to address this. Nobody should feel alone. We might be separated at the moment by the social distancing measures, but nobody should ever feel alone. There are supporters out there, and we need to make sure that people who are being abused do get access to that right support.
So just on the where do you find, where's the money to be sourced? I don't immediately know, but if who was on the line? Did you say? Sorry, you're muted. So the lady from Honeycomb Group, I know. If she contacts me or one of the other MPs, we'll look into that for sure. The question of PPE for hospices, certainly if they're not linked into the supply chain for the NHS, which I know they have a special status, so that might not be the case. I followed up a PPE request on behalf of an organisation that wasn't linked into the NHS, and I believe that the local council have sort of surplus stock of PPE. So that would be a place to start to find out whether if they have stock themselves. If they don't, they will have a list of places to go to get the supply. So that would be my recommendation to the hospice.
Yes, I would also say that we have worked, when the hospital put out a call for PPE, within 24 hours we had over 60 companies who had responded to that, and I'm sure that some of those would be more than happy to work with the hospices as well. So I'm happy to.
So one more thing. I had contact from a design and technology teacher in a school, and there are a whole series of schools making visors, on the 3D printers. So there are a range of organisations. I think partly the problem is that so many people are willing to help and providing elements, but I guess they need the whole. They just need visors. They need everything else as well. So it's coordinating the having all the equipment that they need. which is vital, and they do such a fantastic job. I mean, you know, we're totally in awe of the work that hospices do, and it'd be dreadful to think if they were short of PPE. So again, you know, thanks for their wonderful work, and you know that they should get in touch if all else fails, get in touch with whoever the local MP is, and we will take it forward.
Brilliant, thank you very much indeed. Laura, do you want to unmute Danny, because I think Danny Flynn wanted to ask a question, and I think that I would also like to just, and I'm sure Danny will make a point as well, but you know, charities are at the moment in the forefront of all of this, and yet are also suffering massive loss of income because of they were doing so much through charity shops and everything. They are really sort of one of a group of unsung heroes, I think, that we should recognise. Danny, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking the question, and hi, Joe, and hi, Jack.
Hi, Danny.
Hi, Danny. You all right?
Okay. Yeah. Really, it's regarding. I think the community response in Stoke-on-Trent across all sectors and all places has been absolutely incredible, and shows what brilliant Stokies are. Yeah. You know, we might not have shiny things, but we've got big hearts, and I guess the questions around sustaining that. A couple of things really. We've delivered over 1,000 care packages to young people over the past 8 days, and that's rising, which is fantastic, and having a great effect. We're coming across 20 new families a day that are contacting us for support. I think we're going to be unlocking, you know, when this is through, I don't see that need or that want kind of going away. So I guess it's the question to everybody really, but the kind of MPs to facilitate this. Do you see a role to facilitate the continuation of that community, the stuff we've discovered in the last 5 weeks of community response? I guess that's where Joe and we've had endless conversations about levelling up. Yeah. That's where the rubber really hits the road, isn't it? When you can engage in those families and those communities, and you can see their gifts, talents, but also needs. Yeah. We're identifying a lot of disconnected families in education in terms of a lack of digital access. And I guess the question is around, would you be facilitating something, seminar, perhaps after this, where we can sustain that community good? You know, I was in a meeting with 10 businesses this morning on our Thrive campaign network. All of them want to step up to the plate, but it needs some leadership and some facilitation. Yeah. And yes, of course, I'd like the world according to the gospel of Danny Flynn, but I know that would be pretty terrible and dangerous. But it's the kind of, I guess, the MPs, Chamber of Commerce, the kind of leadership approach to sustain that community good. Just a couple of other things that's practically for the charity sector. We've been having to source PPE privately, mostly in the past 6 weeks, because it's been really difficult to get the council well intended, but the actually resources. It's beginning to drip in a bit better this week than before, so thank you for that. I also want to thank you, the government's response, for some of the economic response, because when the furlough happened, it kind of saved me life, because I thought, how am I going to sustain this or make lots of people redundant? But the primary issue really is about that community response, and how do we capture that good stuff, and how can we work together to facilitate the continuation of that. The charity package is a bit difficult to get access to. We can't seem to get any edge to apply for anything. So I'd like some advice on that, perhaps offline. Thank you.
Right. Well, brilliant as ever, Danny. And thank you for working with me on the idea of a levelling up board. And it's never been more important to get that moving and to get it moving with the new circumstances that we find ourselves in. I agree entirely with you that, to my mind, levelling up in Stoke post COVID-19, or as we come out of it, has got a lot more information that we need to feed in. Has got a lot more needs, as you've identified, that we need to understand better to know what the ask is of government. And we need to share, all the best that we've seen in the last few weeks of the way charities step up and work with businesses and community, and that sense of we're all in it together, which I think that the spirit of that has been in Stoke-on-Trent before coronavirus ever arrived. But as you say, in a sense, it's become very, very visible, and we need to not lose the momentum of the way people have worked together and capitalise on it to formulate a plan that says this is what we need going forward. So we need to have that conversation urgently again, and I think it would be very helpful if you could capture some of the things that you've mentioned about what the situation has been in the last few weeks. If we can capture the new need that has emerged and what that says about what we need to think about for levelling up going forward. But I'm really looking forward to driving this forward, and yeah, I mean, I've always recognised the key role of the third sector, together with business, together with public services. That we're only strong if we work together, and I think that we just need to capture that somehow.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Danny, and thank everybody at the YMCA for all they've been doing to support some of the most vulnerable people in our community at this time. It's absolutely fantastic work that you've been doing, and a number of charities have been doing right across the city. And I think, as you say, it does show the best of us, the best of our city and our communities. And I absolutely hope that we can continue to see some of that work after we come through this, because that is what can come of this. I know most of what's coming from this virus is not good, but I hope that some good can come out of this. And certainly the community response, the things that we've seen happening in our communities, are absolutely what we want to continue to see. And I hope that will be at least some sort of legacy that will see us much stronger after this. In terms of the support that I mentioned earlier, the money that's being put in by the government, 360 million of that is going to be directed through government departments. So government departments are going to be giving that money out to charities, and that money the 360 million is specifically for charities that are supporting vulnerable people and things like that during the crisis at the time. So charities that are doing and providing those key services but need additional support to get through this, that is what that half of that's for. The other half, 370 million, is for small and medium-sized charities, and this is going to be through grants that are going to be administered by the National Lottery Community Fund. So that half is going to be through that, and you need to apply to the National Lottery Community Fund for the other half.
Thank you very much. We're coming to the end of our time, and there are still some questions to answer, so I will pass those on to you after this, if that's all right, for further conversations. It is the first of our policy hours, so we hope to invite you back, both of you, for another session in a few weeks or so time, when we know where we are. I think the question for me really is, I think the government have acted commendably around all of this to support the economy. I think the business community's worry is that this might be the first of other lockdowns, and how will government respond in the future? And I think that I'm not asking for an answer, because I don't think anybody knows, but that is obviously going to be one of the real significant issues, that the economy can't continue to take more and more hits over the next few months. And so I'll just ask government to involve the business community in designing and deciding on how that might be handled in the future. Let's hope we don't need it,
yes,
in case we do.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody very much for attending today. I hope we've answered all of your questions. If you have any other points that you would like to raise, please either raise your hand in the chat, put it in the Q&A, email me or Laura, and we'll pick that up and make sure that Jack and Joe get a chance to answer that. Thank you both very much for your time, Jack and Joe. It's really nice to see you, and I hope everybody stays safe, stays well, and we look forward to all doing business as whatever the business as usual is going to be in the future. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.